Victor and his father, Alphonse, have now returned to Europe after Victor's traumatic stint in Ireland. Victor's still very fragile and feels a crushing sense of shame and despair. The monster is hell-bent on revenge since Victor went back on his word and destroyed the female creature he was building. Victor's best friend, Henry Clerval, is the latest victim of the monster's wrath. So, who will be next? Even after so much horror, Victor remains silent about the monster. He has two reasons for this. One, he doesn't want to be seen as mad, and two, he doesn't want to burden anyone else with the knowledge of the creature. This repression causes Victor to frequently blurt out his guilt for the deaths of William, Justine, and Clerval. Careful, Victor. That's how you got yourself locked up in Ireland. While in Paris, Victor receives a letter from Elizabeth. Since they're meant to be married on his return to Geneva, she wants Victor's assurance that he loves her and not someone else. It's a fair question, considering Victor's strange behaviour and long absences in the last few years. The letter reminds Victor of the monster's threat that he will be with Victor on his wedding night. If the monster intends to murder him on that night, so be it. Victor resolves to marry Elizabeth despite the monster's threats. He'll brawl with the monster if he must. If the monster kills him, Victor will finally be at peace. But if he manages to vanquish the fiend, Victor will be a free man. Victor reassures Elizabeth that she has his heart, but he also has a horrible secret. He promises to reveal it to her on the day after they're married. What a thoughtful wedding gift. Hey team, just a reminder, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps the channel out, and our next upload could be on something taught in your next class. Thanks, and back to the video. As soon as Victor and his father return home, they set a date for the wedding. Little does Victor know what the monster really has in store. Over the next 10 days, while preparations are made for the big day, Victor prepares for mortal combat. He carries pistols and a dagger around, always on high alert, in case the monster launches a surprise attack. But he eventually calms down and starts to look forward to his future with Elizabeth. Surprisingly, it's Elizabeth who's sullen on their wedding day, as if she knows something horrible is going to happen. Still, the wedding takes place, and it's a joyful occasion for the Frankenstein family after years of heartache. But as soon as Victor and Elizabeth reach their honeymoon spot, Victor's heart fills with dread. The calm evening is swept away by a violent storm, and Victor becomes wary that the monster may be near. He's brought his pistol with him and is ready for a showdown. Elizabeth knows something is up, but Victor can't bring himself to tell her about the monster just yet. So he tells her not to worry and go to bed. Meanwhile, Victor stalks the halls of the house, looking for the demon. Come out, wherever you are. Just as Victor starts to think the monster hasn't followed them, he hears two blood-curdling screams. It's Elizabeth! Victor rushes to their room to save her, but he's too late. When he sees Elizabeth's lifeless body flung across the bed like a rag doll, he passes out. When Victor wakes, he staggers into the room where Elizabeth lay and takes her in his arms. She'd been strangled, just like the others. Then, when Victor looks up, he sees the monster standing at the window. He grins and points mockingly at Elizabeth's corpse. Victor rushes to the window, draws his pistol and fires, but the monster is too quick. He dodges the bullet, runs off at great speed, and dives into the lake below. Victor and a team of people try to track the demon down through the night. But it's no use. Eventually, Victor collapses and is carried to bed with a high fever. When he wakes, Victor wanders back into the room to weep over Elizabeth's corpse. But as soon as he remembers his father and brother, panic grips him. What if the monster goes after them next? Victor must get home to Geneva right now. News of Elizabeth's death hits Victor's father very hard. It breaks his dear old heart, and he dies a few days later in Victor's arms. This sends Victor right over the edge. He loses his mind and is locked up in a madhouse for many months. When Victor regains his sanity and is released, he focuses his mind on revenge. But he can't capture the monster alone. He needs backup. So Victor tells his entire story to a magistrate. That's right, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Victor speaks so calmly and eloquently that the magistrate starts to take him seriously. Unfortunately, the magistrate also informs Victor that pursuing such a strong and agile monster would be futile. At this point, Victor begins to tremble with rage, and the old spark of madness returns to his eyes. So the magistrate tries to pacify Victor before dismissing him. So, what's plan B? A solo mission. With some money and jewels to fund his quest, Victor decides to leave Geneva for good. This is the end game. Victor will track the monster until they meet and fight to the death. But he has no idea where to start and ends up in the local cemetery where his family are buried. Victor kneels at their graves and calls on their spirits to help him avenge their deaths. Then, he hears the monster laughing at him from the shadows. Victor lunges at the demon, but again, he's too slow. All he sees is the monster's back as he sprints away through the graveyard. And so, the deadly pursuit begins. Victor tracks the monster across Europe's most hostile landscapes, putting his body through immense stress. But revenge keeps him going. The monster often leaves Victor horrible notes to stir his rage and spur him on. He even leaves food in Victor's path to keep him alive. The monster wants to prolong Victor's torture before they finally wrestle for their lives. Eventually, Victor departs land on a sledge to pursue the monster into the bleak, icy Arctic. At one point, the ice splits, cuts Victor off from the monster's trail, and casts him adrift on an ice floe. Victor is stranded like this for several hours before he's presented with a miracle: Walton's ship. If it wasn't for this, Victor is sure he would have died an ugly death. Even now, Victor fears he will die before he can have his chance to fight the monster. If this happens, Victor implores Walton to kill the monster if he ever crosses paths with him. Victor says he will be there in spirit to guide Walton's sword through the demon's black heart. And that's the story of Victor Frankenstein. Wow, what a heartstopper! In his letter enclosing the manuscript, Walton tells his sister Margaret that it took a week for him to record it. It is a bizarre and shocking tale, but the way Victor expressed himself and the evidence he carried leave Walton in no doubt that it's true. But Walton's curiosity also gets the better of him. He asks Victor for more exact details on how he created the monster. Of course, this really upsets Victor, who offers nothing but regret for his actions. Walton frets that he's about to lose his valuable new friend and offers to help Victor regain his vitality. But Victor is too far gone in grief and exhaustion to accept. All Victor wants now is to kill the monster so he can die in peace and join his loved ones in the afterlife. A few days later, Walton's in trouble. The ice surrounding his ship is shifting and threatening to crush it like a toy boat. Walton fears the lives of his crew are now in danger. The sailors are scared, and Walton worries about a possible mutiny. If Margaret ever reads this letter, you can imagine her thinking, "I told you so." Soon enough, the feared mutiny becomes a reality. Well, sort of. Fed up with the extreme cold and distressed over the deaths of several crewmen, a group of sailors enter Walton's cabin. They demand to return south and abandon the mission if the ice ever releases the ship. Walton is in no position to refuse them, but Victor chimes in. He shames the sailors for their cowardice in the face of danger. He reminds them that they chose this mission because it was dangerous. That's the glory of it. Just as a leopard can't change his spots, Victor still has a passion for glory. But this speech knocks the wind out of him, and he sinks back down in the bed. Walton hopes the men take Victor's speech to heart. Walton would rather die than return home a failure. But Walton's crew feel differently. They've thought about Victor's words, but still demand to return south if the ice breaks. Blast the mysteries of the compass. They want to survive. Walton can barely express his disappointment. In Walton's final entry in his letter to Margaret, he says he's coming home. His heart is broken because, in addition to abandoning his mission, he's also lost his friend. Victor Frankenstein has died. Walton then pauses the letter to investigate a noise. He can hear a gruff voice coming from the cabin where Victor's remains lay. It's the hideous monster! He's returned to grieve the death of his creator. Upon hearing Walton approach, the hideous creature darts towards the window. But Walton tells him to stay. When the monster expresses remorse for Victor's death, Walton reminds him that Victor would still be alive if it wasn't for the monster's evil actions. The monster responds by telling Walton what happened after Clerval's murder. He'd pitied Victor until his marriage to Elizabeth started to become a reality. How dare Victor hope for happiness when he'd denied the monster a mate? The monster murdered Elizabeth out of envy and rage. But now that Victor is dead, the evil that gripped the monster's heart is gone. Victor is his last victim. Walton is initially moved by this, but then he remembers Victor's warning about the monster's eloquence. When Walton reiterates his disdain, the monster reminds him that he's only heard one side of the story. Actually, that's a fair point. The monster then lists the injustices he suffered from the moment he was brought to life. Still, he admits that he has committed terrible crimes, and no one could hate him more than he hates himself. The only thing left for him to do now is flee to a remote place, build a large funeral pyre, and set himself alight. That way, his body will become ash, so no one will ever discover how to create another like him. The monster then jumps out of the cabin window onto a nearby ice floe. Walton soon loses sight of him as the waves carry him off into the distance. Here ends the tale of Captain Robert Walton, Victor Frankenstein, and the pitiful monster. But what's a monster, really? Is it a big, ugly creature you run from in fear? Or is it something that could be awakened in any of us, given the right circumstances? We hope you enjoyed this Schooling Online production. For more easy lessons, check out our other videos.